Hey everyone, welcome to this week's after show of The Last of Us, the HBO adaptation of the Naughty Dog PlayStation series. Unfortunately, Dom, due to some miscommunication, was not able to come on the show today, but I'm going to be doing it by myself. So, it is going to be a shorter show than last week's, but, we're going to go ahead and do the same basic format. We're going to go ahead and go over the show today, which was it's not going to be too much because it's not really much. It was a very plot heavy episode, just kind of like more of what we saw in the second half of last week. But this week's episode is called Infected, and it is actually directed by Neil Druckmann. Let me double check, actually. Let me see. The Last of Us Infected director. Let's see. Yeah, it was directed by Neil Druckmann. All right, yeah. So, as far as I know, it was the first filmmaking that Neil Druckmann has ever done, and I think he did a really good job here. I think he did a really good job on this episode. It is not it doesn't have the big dramatic umph of like the first half of last week's episode, but it did definitely kind of maintain with that sort of intensity, and to sort of let's go ahead and break down this episode sort of according to the plot, right? So we start the show off again in 2003 in Jakarta, where as we heard in the sort of background speech of last week's episode, is where a lot of the shit went down, possibly ground zero. And yeah, we get to see mycologist who gets essentially tracked down by the government. And by the way, I do want to say this, that I think, as a fan of the game, I don't know where this whole like cutting back to 2003 thing is going, right? But I think it's a really good way of establishing and setting up the sort of stakes and the sense of dread that is unique to the sort of fungal infection sort of idea that is behind the Last of Us games and stuff like that. I think it's one of those things that it's not like, your average zombie movie where it's more of a viral infection. The fact that it's a fungal infection means it goes by different rules. And I really like how the show is taking its time to separate itself from other zombie shows by kind of taking this back to 2003 and explaining, no, this is why this is different, right? Like, because the show needs it. You know, something that I've been thinking about over this last week is that I like the Last of Us show, definitely. I mean, I'm enjoying it so far. I love the games, but like there is a sort of thing, the sort of like thing that's creeping right under the surface with when it comes to this adaptation, and that's that like the lore of the Last of Us is not that deep. It's not that deep. It's not that extensive. It's kind of shallow, right? Like that's sort of a bit of a limitation that I think the show has, and can either be set back by it, or can sort of overcome the challenge here. But the problem with the lore of The Last of Us is that it's dead simple, right? It's a zombie game. There was some sort of outbreak, and it spread rapidly, and that's basically it. There's the Fireflies, who are sort of the rebels, in the Fedra, which are the sort of remnants of the United States government who are trying to hold some sort of order together, even though it's a little bit fascistic. And then you have the Fireflies, or these scrappy rebels and stuff like that. But like, other than that, that's about it, right? Like, that's kind of the full extent of the Last of Us lore. And what I think is really good, a smart thing that the show is doing, is because it is something that we've heard so many times. The fact that we are, again, taking the time to sort of go over what the outbreak looked like at the beginning. It is not just sort of kind of showing us why the world of The Last of Us is different than other zombie media, but also like helping to expand the lore, and also kind of just showing how quickly a fungal based like zombie outbreak or whatever could spread, because this is very much tied to real life. And yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to me that they did choose to make an adaptation of the show, and it's going to be interesting for me to see, especially as someone who doesn't like the second game, to see where it goes down the line. But let's focus on today's episode. So the show starts off in Jakarta, and we kind of get a scene where we sort of, it's the kind of scene you get in a lot of zombie movies where it's early on in the infection, and a scientist is brought in and they're sort of like shocked at what they're seeing, and they say just burn the whole city down, bomb the whole city down, and stuff like that. So again, it's nothing we haven't seen before, right? Nothing we haven't seen before, but very well done, very well handled, very well acted. I love the sort of shaky hand acting that the actress playing the doctor has throughout the show. So that was pretty legit. I like that a lot. And so we get to the opening credits, which I dig a lot, and we cut back to sort of Tess, Joel and Ellie, who are kind of trekking their way through the city of Boston in the post-apocalyptic, um, you know, uh, landscape of The Last of Us. And really, I'm going to be straight up with you guys. This is a people mover episode. I like to call them people movers, where the whole point of it is to get someone from point A to point B. And it's all about just trying to make that ride as exciting as possible. And that is the challenge here. Is essentially, how do you take the with something that was in the video game that was super fun to like be in the moment, kind of experiencing the clickers and all that, and then how do we translate that to the audience? And I think they did a really good job in this episode of sort of communicating the experience that a lot of people have with The Last of Us with the first game. When they first understand like how dangerous the clickers are, and how they operate and stuff like that. And I really like how we start off the episode, right? We start off the episode with Ellie essentially like being looked over as if she's a prisoner, as some sort of dangerous prisoner, because she is basically, right? And Joel and Tess are still confused as to what to do and how to handle the situation, but eventually they come to understand that, like, okay, whatever, dude, like she's not going to be an immediate danger, and we do got to get her across the city to meet up with the Fireflies. So they take her out, and then we open the door, and we sort of see what this show's real star, what the real star of today's episode was, and that was the goddamn production design. Um, Again, one of the things that the show is doing a really good job of separating itself from other zombie media is by showing the difference between a fungal outbreak and like a sort of viral outbreak. And I think the way that the fungal outbreak just sort of eats up the city around it, the way that it leaves its mark on the environment and stuff like that, I thought was just absolutely fantastic. I really loved just visually walking through this world. As many times as I've played through The Last of Us Part One, I haven't played the PS5 version of it, but the PS4 remake and the original when it first came out on the PS3. As much as I played it, as much as I've been immersed in that world, having to live in it in quote unquote the real world, in film and all that, and kind of following these characters through this environment, being able to take it in more, really just lets me, like, for me personally, lets me like appreciate the originality that's on display here, and how interesting of an apocalypse it is. I mean, we've all seen the sort of nature reclaiming society visuals much in the past, but we've never really quite seen it the way that this show does it. And I really enjoyed just sort of seeing how this show portrays its apocalypse a lot. And that's essentially what we see a lot, is essentially just them going from one building to another, experiencing all these small dangers and stuff like that. First we start off like in a hotel, which is essentially run down and all that, and we're seeing like the sort of effects of years of like no maintenance on all these buildings and stuff like that, as it collapses around them. And I really like the by the way, I really like that they established that Ellie can't swim. They established that Ellie can't swim in this episode, which was pretty cool. I like that. So then we kind of go through a sequence, and it's just like a little bit more of Joel and Ellie getting to know each other through some dialogue, while Tess is trying to find a way in through this collapsed hallway or whatever. And it's a pretty solid moment, but I think the sort of the big, to me, as a fan of the games, what I really enjoyed the most about this episode was the sequence where we see the zombies from far away, right? Where Ellie first gets to see the zombies, and I guess that was sort of the more emotional arc here, is having Ellie be exposed to being around the infected for the first time, and being in a city in a real world danger. She says over and over that she's been told that it's going to be completely overran and completely dangerous, and it is. But it is also like there's some parts that are empty and shit like that. But I really enjoyed the moment where Ellie goes out, they open the tarp, and then he looks over the railing, and there's just all these zombies that are just sort of, I don't know, just sort of wallowing, just like it looks like they're writhing all over the ground, like they're they look weird. They look like they're eating each other at first, but then you find out no, they're just kind of wiggling around, digging the vibes of the ground and stuff like that. And then you come to realize that the fungus travels underground, and it connects everything, and it has tendrils and all that. So if you step on a fucking spore, that is connected underground to all the fucking clickers who are all connected to it by touch, right? And they all know within seconds where you are, and they'll all come after you, which I thought was something that wasn't really super a part of the games, at least as far as I remember. Like, it's not something that's in the games, but was super cool. I think it worked really dramatically, really well later in the episode and stuff like that. So then we go from the hotel, which was a pretty solid sequence, into sort of the major big the action sequence in this episode, which is where we go to the Boston Museum of Natural History or whatever, or the whatever Independence Hall, shit like that. And we kind of get to have this. First of all, we get to see that like they have to check if the spore tendrils are still alive or dead before they enter somewhere, which is pretty cool. I really enjoyed how we saw that one recently dead being, and essentially that they put two and two together, that okay, it just got here, the dude is dead, and all the fungus is dead around it, so he's not going to be an immediate threat. We can just leave him there to die and all that, essentially, right? And so they go up the stairs, and it's a dangerous thing. And I like how, because of course there's going to be the fungus is going to be essentially like eating at the foundations of these buildings. And so you see that like at some point they're all on the steps, and the steps just sink a little bit, maybe the whole building just sinks. And then we kind of get to the main set piece, right, which I really enjoyed, which was the sequence in the sort of top floor of the museum, where there are two clickers. Right? It's just two of them, and you get to see how fucking dangerous these motherfuckers are. First of all, I really love the buildup of seeing what they look like, and the sort of final reveal of how this show is portraying the clickers was just like, holy crap, dude. That was like that seeing the translation from game to show was absolutely fantastic in my opinion. I really really enjoyed that. So yeah, so that was really cool to watch. And then also like seeing the amount of trouble that just two of them create for our heroes, um it was a really really intense scene to show. Like, I really liked how at some point the camera like stops trying to frame everything cinematically, and it's just frantically looking for, like if the camera guy was frantically looking for safety himself. Um, I thought that was some really good camera work. I thought that was really well directed, really well put together. I think that scene was incredibly tense, and I think it really goes to show again what makes The Last of Us separate from other zombie shows. And it is a sort of like horrific kind of beauty, because I mean these things, yeah, they're scary as fuck. Don't get me wrong, but they look really cool and fascinating and interesting. So it was great, man. It's getting to see fucking clickers and quote unquote real life and stuff like that it was pretty cool. I can't deny that. Like the little fanboy in me is just like, yeah. So then we kind of move forward to the last act of the show, which is what takes place in the actual hall. Excuse me. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Which takes place in the final sequence of the episode. It was pretty damn good, and it's where we get the scene where we find out that Marlene, I'm sorry, not Marlene, Tess is infected. She's got bit on her neck. She's about to turn and stuff like that. And it's a pretty heartbreaking scene, but was something that anybody who played the game was probably looking forward, knew was coming. And I think anybody who knows anything about zombie shows knew was probably going to happen. There's always that scene in the scene, like the with the clickers, where you ask, like, did anybody get bit? And yeah, we find out that Tessa herself has been bit, and she tells Joel to go see Bill and Frank, and they'll help take care of everything. And essentially, yeah, this is the big sort of breakup essentially between Joel and Tess. And what I really enjoyed was that, like, at some point, like, the zombies find out where they are. They also start coming, and they have 1 minute. They have less than a minute to say goodbye to each other forever. That was fucking crazy to watch. Crazy to sort of wrap your head around that. Like, this is it. This is the last time they're ever going to see each other. They clearly have such a long history together, and they're not even going to have the right amount of time to say goodbye. That was absolutely hard. That was pretty intense scene emotionally, but I think the show handled it very well. Um, and then we kind of get to the last moments of the show, and I really love, and this is sort of something that is sort of the benefit of an adaptation, right? Is that you get to see things you never saw in the game because of the medium, it wouldn't have worked and stuff like that. But being with Tess in her final moments, while she's desperately trying to light the match and blow up the building, and all the clickers with her and stuff like that, fucking great. I love the tension, but I like how at some point, oh, first of all, I like how the zombies just ignore her because they knew she was already bitten, right? Like, they already knew she was going, and because she got bit here, she only has minutes, like 2 hours at the most before she turns for good, right? So she's already pretty advanced on, and they all ignore her, but then also they all kind of recognize her as their own. And I love the sequence where the zombie sort of gives her the kiss of death, essentially. And while she's doing that, you can see her fighting the zombie taking over while she finally gets the match to go off, and blows up the city, the Independence Hall, I believe it's called. We have one last shot of Ellie, who just looks confused and like, I didn't ask for any of this. Like, what the fuck? Like, and she's just standing there in front of this building that is just destroyed, and it's Independence Hall, right? And she is a representation of freedom, of independence in the future, freedom from the world of the clickers or the fungal outbreak and stuff like that. So I really love the way that this show chose to end on its final image. I think it's the sort of thing that maybe Neil Druckmann has probably had in mind for a long, long time. I thought this is a fantastic episode. It's gonna be a really short one this week because, again, no Dom, so I have no one to really bounce stuff off with. So I'm just kind of going through the episode and giving my opinions here. But I thought it was a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed what they did here. No real criticisms, man. Like, the only thing that is sort of critical for me, because this is my first time, usually if I read a book or something, it's after I watch the movie. So this is probably like one of the very few times, maybe like Watchmen is the only exception, and even then the TV show was such its own thing that, like, reading the book didn't help a whole lot. But where I literally know the story, I know exactly what's going to happen as we go on, and I can't help but think this is what the Walking Dead show must have been like for people who watched that show when it was coming out. Like, you just kind of know what's going to happen, and you're just kind of sitting back and wondering, okay, how close are we sticking to the original story? And this is a pretty faithful so far, a pretty faithful retelling. Not a lot, not big, not much in the way of big, you know what's the word I'm looking for here? Deviations and all that from the story that we know. But I do think the show is doing a great job. As I predicted last week, we are going to get an entire episode. It looks like next week is going to be just Bill and Frank. I'm excited for that. That's going to be an interesting episode to watch. And that's probably where I'm going to leave it today. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know below what you thought of the episode. Until then, I've been Ed. You guys have been awesome. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.